What's up, guys? So we are going to continue with our application. I will just make an introduction. So what we did last time, we created our backend main folder where we are having the settings, so the default settings of the Django, and we created two apps. So Notes app, Users app. I will recap a bit. An app is just a way of separating our project into more different folders so we can have a more cleaner code. Last time all we have done was that we created the representation of our database. In our database we can create a node, we can create a profile, so we can create a profile, and we can create a user. This is default from the Django. And we learned about the basic relationship between models. So as we said, the profile should have only one user and a user should have only one profile. This is provided by this field, one-to-one field, and we specified the model. And in the nodes, each model that it's created should be created for a specific user, so it should have a foreign key for that user. So a node is going to have the user ID, so the user's node basically. Okay, now we want to make some CRUD operations. We are going to use default functions, and we are going to learn how to make them in a class in the later episodes. So first thing, we are just going to use some functions view so you can understand a bit how things works, and then we are going to switch with classes. Firstly, we are going to need to add some installations, so we are going to learn what an API is. Basically, an API is just a way to call our database from, let's say, our UI, so from our front end, so we can create data, get data, update data, and so on. So this is just how another system, let's see, the front end talks with our backend. So this is going to be with some basic functions. How things are going to work, so we are going to need to install some stuff. If you go to our command prompt and go to the desktop path, so not to the desktop, to the project configuration, so I called it project Notepad. We have the environment, so we need to activate it. env -scripts -activate scripts. Okay, and now we are in our active environment. We can run python mesh.py run server, so this should run our server. Just go to the backend folder and now we can run the server. That's all good. Firstly, what I want to do is to make some installations, so we need to go to the documentation, and I'm going to provide this documentation. I'm going to show you how to get this documentation. So just search for the Django REST framework. So the REST framework is going to help us make those API stuff. So we need to install Django REST framework in our terminal. Let's just close the command prompt with the Ctrl+C and hit pip install Django REST framework. Then in the settings we need to add REST framework. So we installed something and now we need to register it as we did it with the Note apps and Users app. So you need to go to install the apps and add this one right here. You can just copy what I'm writing here, but I suggest you to learn how to use the documentation because things can change. That's all for the moment. Now we can go back, and now because we made these imports, we can use some pretty stuff. Let's first make the possibility to create a node. So if you go to the views, we can import from Django REST. Just a second, it should. I need to select my interpreter, so this shouldn't be a problem for you. That was something wrong with my settings. You don't have to do that. So just write from REST framework import, let's say .decorators, import API view, And now we are going to create our first function. So those API calls like creating a node, updating a node, deleting something is going to be made with functions firstly. Then we are going to switch to classes. So let's say def, we can call it create node. This is just a function. We are going to get the request parameter. There are going to be some stuff that you don't really need to understand right now. So you don't really need to understand what the request is. Just add it. Trust me, you don't need to understand everything from the beginning. This function is going to create something in our database, and we need to specify the fact that we only allow post type of request. So a request is a call of the function. So I will call this function to create a node, not to delete one. So if I'm going to try to delete a node, this API view is going to be something like, no, you cannot delete a node in this function because we are only allowed to make post requests. So post means create data. Okay, let's do a try. Except, so exception as e. So if we are going to have an error, we are going to be thrown here. So and here we can provide the response or something. Now let's try to learn how we can create something. So this function needs some data. So when we are going to create a node, we are going to be providing some data. I'm going to show you that in the future, but right now just imagine that our frontend gave us some data, and we can get the data like this: data equal the request that data. So in the data we are going to have the fields required to create a node. So the name, description, update date, create date, expire date, and the user. Okay, and the user. And what I want to do to make things easier, we can add the user ID into our data, but we could get this through the URL. Let me think what approach should be easiest. Right now, let's get the easier approach. So we are going to get everything into the data. So we are going to have the user ID, the update date, the create date, the expire date, the description, and the name. Okay. In the future, we are going to use serializer for creating, but right now we are just going to use basic creation of the object so you can learn as much as possible slowly. Okay, to be able to create a node, we just need to do something like this. So we need to import the node. So from models import node. So we are going to imagine that this data is a dictionary which contains these fields. Let me just drag them here. So the fields required are, we can hit node that objects that create and specify the fields. We are going to have a name which is going to be equal to data of name. So this is a dictionary and we get the name from the dictionary. The description is going to be the description from the data got from the front end. Let's see like that. We need the user, but let's just add the expire date equal to data dot expire date. This is not crucial right now, but we are going to add it. Okay, now we need to add the user. The user is a foreign key, so we can add the user right like this. We need to query it from the database. So we can imagine that the data is containing the user ID. So let's do something like from Django that contrib that models out that models import user. So we import the user from the Django, the model user, and we can query so user that objects that get, and we can get the user which is having the ID equal to the data of user ID. So this dictionary, let's say that is going to have the user ID for who we are creating the node. So we get the user that should have this node and the data of the node. So we are querying the user from the database with this user ID, and we add it here. So user equal to user. If everything is fine, we can just return response. So from REST framework dot response, import response, return response, data success, and we can add the status. So from REST framework, import status, and this is going to have a status equal to status dot http 201 created, which means that everything worked fine. We created the node. If we encounter any error right here, like let's say that we have an exception, except user that does not exist, which means that when we have tried to query the user, we got an exception, so an error, we can just return a response which is going to contain data bad user ID and the status of http 400 bad request. So the front end, or who the fuck is giving us the data, gave us a bad ID. Else, if we encounter any other errors, it's probably from us, so we can say data, the data is going to be the response. So server exception, so a status of http 500, which means it's our fault. Now we need to provide the path to call this function. We can go to the backend URLs. Let's import from notepad.views, import, or just import views as notes app views. So we import the views as this name. So we are going to have another path. Let's say create node, which is going to call the create node that we just made right now. So we can just give a name, create node. The name doesn't really matter right now. So when we are going to be writing this path, so the URL is going to call this function create node, which is going to get the data, the user, and create the node. And I'm going to show this to you right now. So python manage.py run server. Then we just see what's happening right now. Create node is having the request. I think I forgot something right now. So we're having the request.data. This should be fine. Let me just read the error. We have an issue with the URLs, I think. We don't need to add these brackets, sorry. Okay, now we can just go to this localhost, add it to your Chrome or whatever you're using, paste it right here, and from what you can see, we can see the path create node, so the URL. So we can go to create node. Page not found. Should be able to find it. Let me just delete this one and add this one at the end. Okay, and this got sent us to a page created by Django. We're specifying that the post button, so we can just create data, so we can create nodes. That's the post that we added as a decorator. So from what you remember, we need to send the data. So those brackets are going to contain the data. And how to send this data? Well, our function wants a user ID. So my ID is 1. We can go to database, admin, users, and you should be able to find your user, and you can see 1 right here. So I can say user ID is going to be 1. We can specify the other fields right now, so we are going to need a name, a description, expire date. So name, test, description, random test description, and date time, expire date. I don't know the format right now, let me think. So we can say, I hope that this format is going to be fine. So we can hit post, and we got a server exception, but it's fine. We can just go to the terminal and see what the exception was. And from what you can see, we got a server exception. So the function, so we went to the URLs, we added create node to the URL, which called this function. It got the data, so the data that we added here. So we hit post, so the function was triggered, and we got an issue. We can just do something like, let me just see why we got an exception. Method not allowed. Let me just reopen the server, and let's try to print the data that we are sending. So I'm going to add this terminal right here like that, so you can see how to debug this stuff. I think that it's a problem on the expire date. So the data is user ID, name, description, and expire date. Let's just not send the expire date. This can be the problem, maybe. Not really. Internal server error. We can actually print the error. So print error. This is going to help us a bit more. So from what you can see, value has not the correct format. So we need to send the format like year, month, and day. Maybe something like this. And it gave us a bad request, which means that we went right into this one. So print a, maybe the user does not exist. Oh, I added something. JSON parser respecting a delimiter. We should have one. Line 5. It's about the, okay. I will just not add the expire date for the moment. And let's try to create one like that. So we got success. So everything was fine, but the date time is not really appreciated. Let me just see why. So I need to add the date time, expire date. It should be something like year, month, and day. So they still don't really like our date time. And you can search for Django date time example, and it's going to provide you how this should look like. Let me just search for one real quick. Look at this one. So maybe we need to provide the hour too. Let me just get this one right here. Okay, and this got us a success. So let's create another one. So let's say like don't crash the date time, and we add the post. So this one was for the user ID 1, and we can go to our data. So if you go to nodes, you should be able to see like don't crash the datetime, it's having the correct datetime, and you can see the user ID. Okay, now real quick we can make a function to create a user. So let's go to views, and the same, we can make the imports. Let's copy the imports so we can make everything real quick. Go to the views, paste everything right here. From the models I want to import the profile, and now create user. This one is going to get the data for creating a user, and just a user for the moment. So the user, the Django user. Okay, and I'm going to show you in the next video how we can create a profile, because we are going to have a really good approach. When we are going to create a user, we want to create a profile. So when you are creating your account, you should be having a profile instantly created. We are going to make it manually right now, but we are going to use a different approach in the next videos. So we get the data. I can delete this one and delete this one, and we just say user dot objects that create, and on user should be needing username. Let's see, username is going to be equal to data of username, and let's give it the name, so it should be first name, data of first name. We can just make things pretty simple, not give a first name or last name. We can add the email, so data of email, like this. So the basic stuff, and the password. Now the problem with the password, so the password 1 is going to be equal to data of password 1, password 2 is going to be equal to data of password 2. We need to make some validation. So if password 1 is not equal to password 2, we can just add it like this. So if the password is not equal to password 2, we can just return response data passwords must match, and just a status of 400 bad requests, you gave us bad data. Okay, else if everything is fine, you can make another validation, like to have a certain length, but we're going to do this in the future, and we just want to provide the basics. We need to hash this password, because we cannot save the password. If someone breaks our database, we need the passwords to be decoded. Okay, so you are going to see. So from django.contrib.out.hashers, you can import make password. This is going to hash the password. So password hashed is going to be equal to hash. Let me just. It should be make password 1, and this is the password we are going to provide for the user. So password, okay, and this is going to create an instance of the user. It's saying that this was not closed. So the username, email, password. And it's something that it's not liking. So username, data of username, email, data of email, password. This bullshit. But it's telling me that this is not closed. So user that object that create Oh, sorry, we need to add equal. Oh, it's fine. What's the problem? This is just some random error. Am I missing something? Nope, that's fine. Yep, should be equal. Let's just put it like this. So this should be equal, equal, and equal. Sorry for the misunderstanding. You still don't like it, right? So user that objects that create username. Let me fix the indentation a bit, like this. Okay. Data of username. Okay, this should be equals, and you need to remove the string, so you don't need to specify the fields as a string. Now, because we created the user, we need to create a profile for this user. So a profile is having the same fields, the points, the image we are going to edit later, the email, and the relationship with the user. So we need to create a profile that objects that create, and to create a the username is going to be the same, data of username. The email is going to be equal to data of email, and the points is going to be 0 for the moment. Equal. And now, because they are all creative, we can just return success. Let's run this one, but we need to provide the path to this create user. So if we go to our backend URLs, we can just say path create node, create user, and we need to import from users app import views as users views. And now we can specify create user, and the path is going to be this one, a create user, and the name you can just whatever name, create user. Okay, now if you run the server, it's already running. You can see a new path, so you can see the create user path. Let me just think. I think that I added the decorator, right? Yes, we added the decorator. So from what you can see, we have the post view. Let's add the data. So this is the request, and the request is going to contain the data. So this in the curly brackets, we are adding this request.data, like a dictionary. So the username is going to be test username random. The email is going to be test email random, and the password one, I don't know what password to add, 11, and password 2 should be something, should be equal. Let's add the post. Let me just see the error 1 2 3 4 to add this one like that, expecting comma right here, and server exception. It's fine, we can see this error. Let me just print it. So print a got an expected keyword argument username, so it's not having the username. I forgot to edit username, and this one should be fine. What's the problem? Profile is not having the username. no, so I didn't, I just added the email. Okay, so we can just delete this one from here. It's fine, we can have errors though. Now we can see the other one. So unique constraint failed out under user dot username. Let's try with another username. Just try another username and change the password. I think that that username was created and it crashed on the profile creation. So we created the user without the profile, which is a problem. But we are going to learn how to make a script which is going to delete all the users that doesn't have a profile. Random password org. Okay, let me just add a tutu like this, the email. So post, and this was success. So the just try another username should have a profile now. And if you go to admin users, so we have the just try another username, which is having this username and the email, and it created, it should have created what was the email once again? Test email random. So we have the profile test email random, but is not related to the user. So we forgot to add this one. So when you are creating the profile, you need to specify that the user is going to be equal to this user created right now. So user like this. Now if we are going to call the endpoint once again, let's go to create user, paste everything. Now should work. This is the username, the email, whatever password. And now if you hit post and we go to the admin to see our database, so we can see a new user just now should work, and the profile, the email I added Ruby AA, and with the relationship. So this profile was created for this user. That's the whole idea with the relation. So we created a user and the profile for that user, because in that profile we can add more fields. Okay, that's all with our video. Hope you enjoyed it, and this time we are going to continue with the other CRUD operations.